mental health and stigma, and how it relates to his life and his happiness. Hakeem.
Depression was so real when I was down and doubled over. When I laid on my couch, it was a coffin, it buried all of my dreams. Lethargy was stitched into my cushion. I was merely a shade of my brightest self. I laid in silence, but sleep did not call my name. My emotions pinned me down. My tears danced from the corners of my eyelids and slowly dripped towards the ground. Hakeem, when there is so much to live for, how could the lowest point of your life ever convince you of giving up? Those were words that emerged out of my experience living with mental health issues and mental illness. Tonight, by the end of this talk, you're going to see that we are more than just our highs and lows. We are not our mental illnesses and our challenges that we face. We are greater than that. We are our experiences. My experience with mental illness began in the fall of 1998, off the heels of becoming the first African-American male valedictorian in my high school's history. I remember pulling in between the winding pathways of Harvard Yard and sliding open my parents' white minivan door and stepping out into the lush green grass of Harvard Yard. And I looked all around me, and behind one of the trees was my dorm. It was called Matthews Hall. It had deep red bricks and sandstone-colored archways. I looked over my shoulder. My parents were smiling. They were happy. It's like, he's going to Harvard. He's getting out the house. We got 2-for-1 deal. And I was smiling and happy too, because we were moving into a new phase of our lives. Little did I know that the first stop with mental illness was going to be that fall of 1998. First few weeks into school, I remember going to downtown Boston and hopping into a cab with a few of my friends. I had on my best shirt that I had at the time. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was like, you look good. No, you look good. And I was feeling great about myself. We walked into the club 5 minutes after being there. My heart started leaping out of my chest. My palms became sweaty. My mouth became dry. I turned to my closest friend, Kim. I said, Kim, what should I do? I'm really not feeling well. She said, Hakeem, if you're not feeling well, just head back to the dorm. We'll come check on you later. 20 minutes after leaving my fall freshman dorm, I found myself climbing up my 5 flights of stairs, turning off the lights, pulling the covers over me, not knowing what was going on. Later to find out that it was a panic attack. People with mental illness have passions, have purpose, and mine in college was poetry. Poetry, however, was that second access point for my experience and journey with mental illness. That was the poetry book I kept from fall of 1999 all the way into 2001. Fall of 1999, this was some of my first poems before. And I remember performing it on the stage lights just like this in Harvard Yard. The spring of 2000, however, my writing changed. That spring of 2000, I felt that if I fell asleep, I would lose my creativity, so I stayed awake, and I was writing. In fact, I said, I must continue writing. It's imperative for me to continue writing, meaning that spring of 2000, I stayed awake over the course of 3 weeks. I only slept for about 2 hours a night. One night, 2 of my friends were dropping me home, now in front of my sophomore dorm. I was sitting in their black Nissan Pathfinder. One friend was here, the other friend was there, and I was sitting in the back seat, and I leaned over to my friend. I said, I have to translate the Conjuring for you. The Conjuring is talking, the Conjuring is speaking, the Conjuring is saying, verb. My friend looks back at me and says, Hakeem, are you all right? The poetry show is over. Your dorm is right there. You can get out. I have to translate the Conjuring. The Conjuring is talking, the Conjuring is speaking. I leaned to my other friend. I said, the Conjuring is saying, verb, metaphor, verb. Hakeem, you don't understand what I'm talking about, and I leaped out of the car. It was raining that night. And I heard each and every single drop of rain hit the green leaves, hit my shoulder, split into 2, hit the ground, split into 2 again. There was nobody else out there that night but one man on the corner. He had a long beard, he had a white robe, his arms are outstretched, and that evening as a 19-year-old at Harvard University, that spring, I saw Jesus on the corner. Made sense. Went inside, fell asleep, and I woke up and I started writing that. Do you know what those were? Those were my prophecies. I was a poet, I was also a prophet, and those are my prophecies. I showed my roommate Ian, I said, Ian, I'm Neo, N-E-O-O-N-E, I'm the anagram of 1. I started running and jumped. He says, Hakeem, are you okay? He called my parents. My parents drove from DC where they were for my cousin's graduation and came and picked me up. Imagine the look on their faces. Imagine the look if you had to pick your son or daughter up from college, receiving a call from their roommate that something is wrong. They picked me up in the same white minivan they dropped me off in 2 years earlier, but this time, their eyes had tears in them. We got back home to Hempstead, where I live, and we were standing in our backyard. And I remember putting on my long white Harvard cheerleading t-shirt. It had big red bold letters spelling out Harvard in front, but I flipped it around because I was Neo. N-E-O-O-N-E. My mom looks me in my eyes, she says, son, we gotta take you to the hospital. By this time, tears rolling down her face. I'll go to the hospital, Mom, because I could also speak Russian. So when I got into the emergency room that sophomore year, the spring of 2000, I started speaking Russian to the woman on the phone. That's when they knew something was really wrong. I was in the triage area, the area was closed. I was flipping over and over. Now I had not slept in 24 hours. My mind was racing. My dad was to the foot of the bed, and his deep baritone voice, he said, son, please go to sleep. Go to sleep. I couldn't fall asleep. So I walked in through the dimly lit door of the psychiatric ward that night. 8 nurses' aides gave me a gown. They said, change into the gown, Hakeem, and go to sleep. I couldn't fall asleep. I had straps on my arms and legs, and I felt a prick of medication, and they said it's going to slow your mind and body down. That spring of 2000, as a 19-year-old, I found myself on a psychiatric ward for 2 weeks. My journey experience on the psychiatric ward actually helped me to prepare what I was about to find out. Young doctor walks up to me, he was my psychiatrist, he says, Hakeem, do you have a moment? I'm like, in the psychiatric ward, I'm not going anywhere, I believe I do have a moment. This time I'm shuffling now because of the medication. He says, Hakeem, you were experiencing a manic episode. Those high parts, that was the top part of bipolar disorder. You were having hallucinations and delusions. You did not see Jesus. You're not Neo. Those are disordered thoughts. You probably experienced the other end, which is depression. Here's your medication and prescription. You'll be able to get a psychiatrist when you leave the hospital. Things were not the same for me. I went back to school. Instead of being this big, strapping 200-pound guy, I now gained 30 pounds over the course of 3 months. My roommate just thought I was tired because I was sleeping 18 hours a day. When I was sitting, have you ever felt anxiety so bad that you would be sitting in one place, but you were going to feel like you're going to leap out of your skin? That's what I felt anytime I walked into the dining room hall. I took 1.5 years off from school, but there's a silver lining to my story, and I do show my parents and family because they're the ones that I give thanks for, because they supported me in the times and loved me in the times that I needed it the most. I asked all the audiences that I speak to, did you know that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder? When I first walked out into the stage, started sharing my poetry, did you know? Many people, most people cannot answer yes. And I say that's the thing. What we think mental illness is, really is not. Ultimately, we are not our highs and lows. We are not our labels. We are not defective. We are not broken. We are not that. That is the stigma talking around mental illness. People are dying because of mental illness. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among teens. 1 out of 4 adult Americans in any given year has a diagnosable mental illness, but we're not talking about it. Half of all lifetime cases of mental illness begin by the age of 13, 3/4 begin by the age of 24. However, sometimes it takes a decade, over a decade, for somebody to actually get the help and treatment that they need. My stigma and shame around mental illness was so deep that I actually left my job in order to do what I'm doing now. In 2012, I left my job to join NAMI's In Our Own Voice program. National Alliance on Mental Illness had a program called In Our Own Voice, and I've been out into communities speaking to people across the country, sharing my story and journey around mental illness. I'm so grateful that there is a platform that I realized that my deepest pain could be the platform for my highest purpose. In 2013, I had the fortune of being able to go into high schools, middle schools, and colleges to share my journey. As a NAMI Queens Nassau Let's Talk Mental Illness presenter, I've spoken to over 15,000 students and students across the country. What I've had to say to them is that although you may go through something, you're not your diagnosis. If you're diagnosed with a mental illness, there is hope. It's okay to talk about what you're going through, and there's absolutely no shame in seeking treatment, and that's what I say to you tonight. In my journey with mental illness, I lost a lot of who I was. I became a sketch of my former self. However, through acceptance of what I was going through using treatment, through seeing my doctors and getting therapy, through actually using coping strategies and skills that have allowed me to do what I love doing most, which is share my personal story, to break down the walls of silence and shame and allow people to be vulnerable about what they're going through. I've allowed myself to become clear about who I am. I'm not my mental illness. I'm not my disorder. I'm Hakeem Rahim. In 2014, I was able to testify in front of Congress and share my experiences with lawmakers. When I was 19 years old, curled up on my dorm room floor, I had no idea that speaking and sharing my voice around my diagnosis was possible. I had the opportunity to share my story with lawmakers in order to clear the way for anybody else who wants to share their story to share it as well. I want to leave you with that tonight. We may go through highs and lows. We may have labels, but we are more than our labels. We are our experiences. We're not broken, we're not defective, we are our experiences. Now that, my friends, is an idea worth spreading. Thank you.